Hi, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. We're going to get started in a few minutes. So get comfortable, get excited. Going to have some fun. So today's webinar, Become a Force for Wellness in the World. And so excited to see you here. I see people are still logging in from all over the world, and it's really exciting to have you all here today. So what I'm going to talk about today is muscle response feedback. And as you can tell, I'm pretty passionate about it. And so, but I want to give you an introduction to what this tool is really about. So we're going to talk a little bit about the philosophy of healing and look at the two different philosophies of what Western medicine is like versus what more natural approaches are like. And we're going to talk about the nature of stress and why that is such a big deal and how that affects the body. And then we're going to get into doing some muscle response feedback. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but I'm also going to demonstrate it. And hopefully you'll be able to check it out for yourself too, particularly those of you that are seeing this maybe for the first time or don't have as much experience using this tool of what I refer to as the voice of innate intelligence. Let's dive in. So the first thing I want to chat about is this aspect of the philosophy of healing. Now, as I mentioned, I grew up in a Western medical household, and the Western medical model, the allopathic model, has grown, and obviously it's been dominant in the United States for a long time, but it's also even grown around the world and shifted even into countries that grew up with that had completely different models of healing for thousands of years. And the allopathic model basically looks at symptoms, what a person is experiencing. It's kind of a reductionist model. So it takes the symptoms and it focuses on those. And the idea is that if you can relieve the symptoms, then people will feel better. The problem with that is that it doesn't really address the underlying cause of what might be causing that problem. And then the way it addresses them is through medication. And the medications are usually derived from natural substances. But the thing is, with natural substances, we're talking about plants and foods and things like that. And you can't patent a food. You can't patent a plant. And so unfortunately, this has become sort of a very money-driven scenario where things are extracted, changed just a little bit so that the process of doing that can be patented and owned by a particular company, and then they can turn it into a medication or a drug and use that to start treating people's symptoms. The challenge with that is that once you change that natural substance, even just a little bit, the body doesn't recognize it for being what it is. And so that's why medications all have side effects. And, it amazes me still to, if I'm watching TV or something and I see the commercials come on about some medication, and at the end of the commercial, you see this, you hear this long list of side effects. And even though it's played out as, helping you in this wonderful way, I sit there and wonder, why would anybody want to do that and risk all of these long lists of horrible sounding things? Yet that's kind of the nature of where we are. And the power is very much in, the doctor's hands, where we feel like we have a problem and we go to the doctor to fix it. Now, Western medicine and the science behind it has done a lot of wonderful things. So I don't want this to sound like, I'm completely anti-allopathic medicine. If I've been in a serious accident or, something like that, I have broken bones or, other serious problems, then I am going to absolutely want a doctor to, potentially save my life and fix me up so that I can get to a point of functioning similarly to how I was, or as best as I possibly can, to where I was before. But so much of people's health problems are not that kind of acute problem. They're more chronic problems. And those chronic problems build up over a long period of time, and people aren't necessarily even aware of where the problem started. So when you're treating the symptom, they go to the doctor, and the doctor, often ends up trying a medication and let's see how this works. And then if that doesn't work, we'll try something else. And that comes along with the side effects and everything else. And sometimes that works, and that's great. But the side effects then sometimes get to be a problem, and then you get another medication to deal with the side effects. And you end up building with these, compensations on compensations of dealing with the medications. And that can be a challenging thing. So, for me, when this is one of the problems that I went through in my little health journey, was figuring out that all those antibiotics were not actually helping with with the problems I was having. I finally figured out that, I would catch a cold, I would get chronic bronchitis, I would cough and wheeze and spit out horrible looking things from my lungs for 3 weeks while taking antibiotics. And it finally occurred to me, if this is supposed to be helping me, why is it still taking 3 weeks for me to do this, to get through it? So I stopped taking the antibiotics at one point, and I figured, let's see what happens if I don't take the antibiotics. And I coughed and I wheezed and I hacked and I spit up horrible things from my lungs for 3 weeks, and it went away. It was exactly the same. So I decided at that point, yeah, there's something that's just not quite right about that. So the difference is, that allopathic medicine just really struggles with the chronic issues that people have. Now, in natural medicine, most natural medicines go by this philosophy that the body is designed to heal itself. I mean, we're a pretty amazing structure here with all kinds of things going on with our organs, our brains. And so that's the general idea, is that the body was designed to actually take care of itself. Nevertheless, it does run into challenges. And so when it runs into challenges, what we do, we look at that as a blockage to healing. So what do you do about that? Well, one of the things the body's really, really good at is compensating. And so when there's something that's not going right, the body knows that. There's this innate intelligence that it's in touch with things that are going on in the body. It knows when something's not working right. And so it does something to try and shift that. Now, on an example of that on sort of a conscious level is, let's say you sprain your ankle. If you sprain your ankle, then you start limping around everywhere and, going around like that. And that's how you compensate for the ankle not being able to support your weight. So what happens there, though, is that now you're putting pressure on your other leg, which then translates, so the opposite knee is now taking more load, and then that puts an awkward thing onto the other hip, and things start to shift around. And if you're limping for 3 weeks like that, then the body, that compensation takes its toll. Excuse me. So then, months later, you might end up with a knee problem or a hip problem. But at the time when that starts bothering you, you're probably not thinking about the ankle and that the ankle had anything to do with that. Whereas if you were able to do something about it and manage that compensation, then that may not have happened. So that's a pretty obvious one. That's a physical one. But so much of what the body does is actually subconscious. It knows when certain things in the body just aren't being handled properly, detoxification and things like that. If you're missing an enzyme to complete a particular biochemical process, it just stops. And so the body then tries to compensate for that. And it has very clever ways of doing that. And you have no idea that that's going on. And, the idea is to do that long enough to wait for the problem to get fixed so that, it can then go through the healing process and everything's going to be okay. But what happens if it doesn't get what it needs? It continues to compensate. And that compensation might then put pressure somewhere else that needs another compensation and another compensation. And because the body is so resilient in doing this, you have no idea that that's even happening. So it's not until, it could be years, even decades later, you get a symptom, a pain, some sort of dysfunction, whatever it is, that suddenly you realize, something's not right and I'm not feeling well. And off you go to the doctor. And the doctor looks at your symptom and says, here, try this. But it has nothing to do with what the underlying cause was. So if you had a way, if the body had a way of communicating what the underlying cause is or was, then you have a way of unwinding that stress and perhaps even letting the body say what it needs to unblock that blockage so that it can go through its own innate healing response. And the other challenge about compensation is that it takes an enormous amount of energy. And the more and longer you have to compensate, the more energy it takes to do that, because the body's simply trying to maintain your ability to function. And that energy that it takes to do all that comes right out of the body's ability to heal. So the more compensation builds up, the less ability you have and less energy you have to do the healing you need to do. And eventually something's going to break down. So with more natural healing modalities, we try and go and figure out, well, what's the cause? It's this holistic aspect of treating the whole body as opposed to just zeroing in on the specific symptomatic piece. And so that's kind of a bit of an overview for you. And I think a lot of you got an email where I talked a lot about this compensation process. And that's a huge, energy drain on people. So what we want to do is start shifting to wellness and start, addressing the body on these causal levels so that these patterns unwind and it can go through its natural healing process. And if the body had a way of communicating that, then we would have an enormous advantage to figure out, what's blocking the body's ability to do that, and what does it need so that it can get back on track. Now, obviously, and I know a lot of people out there have been using muscle response feedback. You know where I'm going with that using the muscle has this ability to do that. And that's why I refer to it as the voice of innate intelligence. So that's a little bit about the underlying philosophy, but that's, really important to understand. I really enjoy talking about models because, models provide a framework of understanding so that we can, better really understand what it is we're doing, when we're doing it. So I'm going to shift now a little bit and talk a little bit about stress. And I'm just going to keep a little track on time and see where we're at. Okay, we're good. So, stress is a huge part of the challenges, the health and wellness challenges that people have today. But stress is kind of this big picture thing. There was a Swedish doctor by the name of Hans Selye. I know probably a lot of you have heard of him. And he spent a lot of his life doing a lot of research about stress. And he categorized stress in 3 different stages. And interestingly, the body has its own stress gland, the adrenal glands. And when we do assessment of the adrenal glands, and that's assessed even medically, then they also do the same thing. The adrenals have 3 stages of kind of stress breakdown as a means of assessing how the adrenals are doing in managing certain types of stress in the body. So the thing about stress is, it's not just the stress itself that's the problem, it's how we actually respond or react to stress. And, Hans Selye identified that there was good stress and bad stress, but that it's still stress. Some of the most important events in our life can be also the most stressful. Your wedding day, or your first day on a new job, or any number of really positive things can be very stressful. Doing your first webinar can be very stressful. And so, but it's how you respond to that stress that makes a difference. And, this is where this aspect of wellness comes in, because, wellness isn't just the absence of pain and dysfunction and disease. It's how you are in your life. It's how you manage those kinds of things. My good friend Francis Rico, who's also a shaman extraordinaire here in Sonoma County, and he has a saying that says, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. And I love that saying. And that really speaks to this aspect of wellness. And it's so interesting, and you can see lots of different examples of how people manage their way through their lives with stress. There's this Australian guy on video who has no arms and legs. And that, he's had a very challenging life as a result of that. But he goes around giving these amazing talks that are just inspiring, and ends up, of course, with everybody in tears and all of that kind of stuff. But, that it's incredible to, witness his ability to go through his life with the attitude that he's got. And yet, there are a lot of people who are challenged in a lot lesser ways and are so focused on, the disabilities and the stresses that these things happen. So let's see, where were we? Right, moving through stress and how we do that. And some people define themselves around stress, and that becomes kind of, their modus operandi. And clearly, they end up not necessarily enjoying their lives as much. And so, managing stress becomes a key to how you are able to move through your life. And sometimes, that can be a really challenging thing. And trying to do that on your own isn't necessarily the best way of doing that. So sometimes we need outside help, and that's when we do go to somebody to get assistance in moving through our stress, whether it's physical, emotional, bioenergy, sorry, little distracted, biochemical, and on a nutritional level, or even energetic. These are all our 4 levels of holistic being. So, and that stress has a huge effect on your brain. Your brain really is this stress sentry. Bear with me for a second. I thought I'd muted everybody, but I'm going to do that and try it again. Okay, let's see how that goes. So, the way the body responds to stress when it recognizes that it's under stress is that the brain is constantly looking out for everything that's going on. So it's taking information from all your five senses and more and comparing that to everything you've ever experienced. And if anything you've experienced, it runs into a match that it says, okay, that was something that was unpleasant or dangerous, it puts you into an automatic response pattern. And that happens so fast that, you just do that. And it's not until afterwards that you realize what you've done and wish that perhaps you'd done something else. Has that happened to any of you? Anybody had that experience before? So, yeah. And part of that response is that the forebrain, which is our most recently evolved part of our brain, gets cut off. The blood just gets drained out of it. And that part of the brain has what's called your executive functions. And it's your ability to kind of stay in present time, respond to stress, and take in what's happening and come up with the best solution for right now. And sometimes your response from when you were 2 years old isn't necessarily the best response. So when you can stay present and make a different response, then that's to your advantage. Now, if there's something truly life-threatening, then obviously you want that system working like that and doing what it's designed to do. But, thousands of years ago, when our species, biggest challenge was the saber-toothed tiger, that was one thing. That was like, no, those were real life-threatening scenarios. But now, we've evolved into this huge numbers overtaking the planet. We have massive amounts of technology, massive amounts of information bombarding us. Our society has created all kinds of models for what we're supposed to be doing and how we're supposed to be doing it and how we're supposed to survive. And it's all very overwhelming. And so that can keep us in that stress pattern way more than we were originally designed to. If you look at history, if you look at the long history leading up to, say, the mid-1800s, and you average out what the average amount of progress was in any given century over thousands of years, and you create a mean for what that average is, and then you look at the amount of progress that's happened in the last 100 to 150 years. There are studies that say that that amount of progress amounts to when you compare it to what happened for thousands and tens of thousands of years prior to that, the amount of progress that we deal with now is equivalent to 20,000 years of progress in a century. That's an enormous change. And it's a huge amount of change for our neurology and our beings to have to adapt to. Adaptation takes time, and we're used to kind of adapting slowly to these things. And now we haven't been given the opportunity to adapt to that level of change. And so that amount of stress is actually causing our forebrains to start to lose certain abilities of function. In fact, our whole brain has lost abilities to function. We don't perceive the same amount of colors that we did 100 years ago. So anything we can do to start managing that stress is going to be very much to our benefit. And this aspect of using your forebrain and spending more time in present time and having the ability to respond to your environment rather than react to it is, a critical aspect of wellness. And so regardless of what certain challenges might be, we weren't designed to completely freak out and think that leaving my cell phone at home is the same as I'm going to die. And yet that's how we've started to take that. And we've only had cell phones for like 10 years. So, you know, it's a pretty major change to have to go through. And yet now we're so dependent on them, and people just sit there and they're on their phone. They're on their phone in the subways, the cars, in restaurants, you know, all of this kind of stuff. So it's a big challenge. So anything you can do to help people manage stress and identify, you know, how stress is actually affecting the body and what the body wants to do about that is going to help them. And, you know, if you can do that in a way that gives the body the opportunity to, you know, release its compensations before it gets to the point where they break down and create symptoms, then, you know, you're also talking about things on a preventative level and maintaining that level of balance so that people can start to function in the way they were designed to and start to enjoy life the way they, you know, the way they're designed to. So that's a little bit about stress. I noticed there's some things coming up in the chat box. I just want to see. Oh, it's just everybody introducing themselves still. You know, if you have any questions that are coming up or comments, feel free to, you know, put them in the chat as well. So, so then, you know, so what I'd like to do is introduce you to muscle response feedback, because this is the best tool I've seen to have a direct communication with the body. And it's direct. This is your muscle. And you have the ability to go in there and start communicating with the body, because this is your voice of innate intelligence. And so using this voice of innate intelligence, you have the ability to go in and start identifying where blockages to healing exist. And because you're working with those blockages, you're also now working with the cause. You know, so many times, you know, I'll be doing something with somebody when I'm working with them, and you know, they might ask me, "Is how come you're doing something to my foot?" Because, you know, my problem is my shoulder, and I'm just doing what the body tells me to do. And yet, after I do whatever I'm doing on their foot, I ask them to move their shoulder, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that feels a lot better. You know, how'd you do that?" So when you can start working on the causal level and let the body do what it's designed to do and unravel the stress picture, access its own innate healing response, then, you know, you're giving it that opportunity to do that. And that's incredibly empowering for a person. You know, that's another sort of different part of the model. You know, the model that I work with is one of self-responsibility and education, so that as I'm finding things about what the body's telling me, I'm feeding that back to the person so that they know what's going on. And I let them know they are their own best healer. They are their own best resource for what they need in order to get better, which is very different than feeling like, oh God, I'm sick. I got to go to the doctor and see what the doctor can give me to make me feel better, which just puts all the power into their hands. And, you know, it's just a different model. And then, but even though, you know, so you have this voice and it has the ability to identify where blockages exist, and it has the ability to work now with the cause and not just the symptom, it also has the ability to give the body the opportunity to say now exactly what it wants to unblock the blockage. And to me, that's the most fun part, because that can come from anywhere in the healing arts, limited only by, you know, what you're legally allowed to do. You know, obviously, if I'm not a licensed acupuncturist, I can't be sticking needles into people, and I can't diagnose and prescribe and treat and do the things that doctors do. But I don't want to do that. You know, it's not up to me to diagnose what's wrong with you. It's just the opposite. I want your body to tell me what it needs. It doesn't matter what the diagnosis is. I just want to unravel the stress and energy pattern that's going to allow you to access your own innate healing ability. And when I can do that by offering tools from the physical, the biochemical, nutritional, the emotional, and the energetic areas, the body gets to pick what it wants in the order it wants it, what it needs right now specifically in order to build up its energy, release compensations, and access its own innate healing response. So that's why I love muscle response feedback. It is just the best tool I know to be able to help people in this way. So I want to demonstrate that for you. I don't know how many people out there are people that don't have a lot of experience with this, but regardless, I'm going to do a little demonstration for you, and I have my friend, the lovely Carol. Hello. Here. This is Carol.
Hi, everyone.
And so, Carol, have we ever met before?
We have.
Oh, okay. I guess I can't use that one then. Okay. So, yes, we have met before. In fact, I know Carol pretty well. But Carol is not a client. And so Carol doesn't have a lot of experience. I'm sure I've made her stick her arm out and have me push on it before. But she doesn't have a lot of experience with, having muscle response feedback performed on her. So as a somewhat newbie, we're going to just kind of see what happens. So I'm going to just take her arm and I'm going to bring it forward about 30 degrees, and I'm going to ask her to keep her elbows straight and locked. And this is the arm position for a muscle called anterior deltoid, which is up here in the shoulder. And I'm just going to ask Carol to hold this position. And I'm going to apply gradual pressure and just see if she can maintain this position. So go ahead and hold against my pressure as I add it. And it's clear to me the muscle, I'm adding a couple of pounds of pressure now. Her arm is not moving. It feels locked. Do you feel like you're using a lot of energy to hold your arm up?
Not too much.
Yeah. Okay. And so that we call a locking muscle. That indicates to me that the muscle is working reasonably well. Let's see how the other arm is doing. Keep that elbow straight right there and hold. How's that feel?
About the same.
About the same. So she holds that. So what I want to do, what do I want to do? I'm going to do something probably do something maybe even a little more advanced than I originally had intended to, but just for fun, I'm going to go through and I'm going to touch a series of points on her body, and I want to see how her muscle responds to each one of those points. These are from Chinese acupuncture. So I'm just going to start touching these points and hold. And so each time I release, I touch a point and I hold, ask her to hold, and I touch a point, and I keep doing this. And I keep doing this. So I come down here, I come here, there's her belly button, touch points, touch. Whoops. Okay, so I just touched this point here on her rib cage, and as soon as I did that, I'm not using any more pressure, but her arm just immediately released. Can you feel that difference? Yeah. Okay. And so I'm going to keep touching some other points. Those are good. I'm going to come to the same point on the other side. Oh, and the arm goes down again. That's weird. That, the usual response when people experience this, it's like that they either say, that's weird, or that's cool. And, if it's a kid, they say, do it again. Okay, so we have these 2 points, and that means something to me, but, I'm not going to get into that. That's sort of beyond the scope of what we're doing today. But so just for fun, how would you feel about thinking about something? Do you have anything stressful going on in your life right now?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. So why don't you just get a picture of what that is? Okay. And so now she's thinking about this stress and has a picture of what that stress looks like. And I'm going to push on her arm and let's just see what happens. And how does that feel?
It's harder to keep.
It's harder to keep up. So
Yeah,
that's not holding anymore. So just thinking about this stressful thing is causing a change in the muscle response. So that tells me something. That tells me that, there is stress associated with that. So keep thinking about that because, let's just for fun, let's play with this for a second. Keep that elbow straight. Now that she knows her arm isn't holding the same way, she's trying to cheat. People will do that. Okay, so let's hold this. Okay, actually stop thinking about that.
Okay.
But that's still kind of in her energy. I'm going to start touching points. So right now I'm testing the muscle, checking a muscle, getting a response. Oops. Now this point is showing. That one didn't show before. Oops. There's another point that's showing. This point is still showing. And there's another point that's showing. And on the other side, that one's okay. That one's okay. But that one's not. So now, having just thought about this stress, she now has 4 points that are showing. So that shows you that, just this stress that, is going on in her life is actually having other effects in her body that weren't there when we checked her before we had her think of that stress. So let's see if we can just do something about that real quick. So I'm just going to have you touch these points on your forehead right here. I wasn't going to do this originally, but so this is actually a little technique that you can use to help alleviate emotional stress. So touch those points right there,
Both
just
hands?
with both hands, just a light touch. And while you're doing that, think about that stressful situation and just develop it a little bit. And now take a moment to resolve that stress. Create a picture that is one that you'd like to see that stress play out of. Do you feel any pulses going on up here at all?
I do.
You do? Okay, cool. That's usually a good indication. Yeah, okay. All right, so let's let go of that. How did that feel?
Good. I mean, there was some resolution.
There was some resolution.
Yeah,
okay.
Like it. Yeah.
Do you want to? Do you mind saying anything about what the stress is? You don't have to, but
It's a potential career shift.
A potential career shift. I don't know if you can hear her through my microphone, so I'm just going to, feedback what she's saying. So a potential career shift, and so we went through this little process, and so now let's see if what kind of difference that's made. So keep that straight. I'm going to just add a little pressure, and that holds. And now think about the career change, and I'm going to add a little pressure. And it's not changing anymore. Do you feel the difference now from before? Yeah. And just out of curiosity, what's it like to think about that now? Does it feel any different to think about it from how you thought about it the first time? Yeah.
The feeling is different. It's less stressful.
It felt less stressful to think about it. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, so now let's keep this straight, really straight, and but bring this down just a little bit. And I'm going to go through those points again. So this one showed before when she was thinking about the stress, and it's not anymore. That one showed when she was thinking about the stress, and that one's not showing anymore. This one showed even before that, and now it's not showing anymore. Isn't that interesting? And the back one isn't showing anymore. It's on this side, also not showing. So awesome.
I'm cured.
She's cured. You know, at least until something else comes along. So great. How do you feel?
I feel good.
Okay. So one thing I want to mention about the actual, when you're actually doing muscle response feedback, you know, is bring this arm down just a little bit. And let's move a little closer to the camera here. Well, I'm going to raise her arm up to just for this point, but I want you to notice that this is like a really key thing when you want to do quality muscle response feedback. Notice that when I come down on her, I'm above the wrist, and I just kind of rest there for a second. And now, you know, I'm going to ask you to hold this position. I'm going to apply my pressure very gradually. And how does that feel?
It feels
And,
fine. I mean, I can feel the gradual
right.
nature of the pressure.
And I'm gradually adding more pressure, more than I would even normally use. But notice that her arm doesn't even move. Right? If I go nice and gradually, that gives the muscle an opportunity to respond to the pressure. And that's what should happen. There, you know, if a muscle is holding, then there should be no movement whatsoever. If I go faster, okay, hold this pressure. So notice I go faster, and what happens? There's a bounce, and it goes down, and then her immediate response is to push harder back up, which means that there's other muscles coming into play to compensate and do that. And it's just because a muscle can't, you know, really can't respond quickly enough to that kind of pressure. And so and that can cause a lot of confusion, you know, that I've seen in a lot of people over many years of doing this. And so the thing I want to impress upon you is to add gradual pressure. Just very lightly rest, and then tell the person you're adding pressure, hold, and I just add that gradual pressure. And as you can see, there's simply no movement, but I'm adding gradually more pressure, and there's still no movement. So that's a little best practice trick for doing muscle response feedback. Do you want to try it on me? Because
sure.
You've never really done this on anybody. So
this one?
Yeah, are you okay on that side? Do you want to switch sides? Yeah, let's go like that. All right. So I'm just going to hold my arm up like she was doing before. And so, you know, just remember adding that gradual pressure. How does that feel to you?
Yeah, I can feel you meeting me.
Okay. Now, do you feel like you need to use that much pressure to know that I'm really holding? She's using a pretty good amount of pressure, but she did it gradually, so I'm able to respond and still hold that. Try it again. And just you know, just go, fingers, right? Yeah, that's fine. Just go until you really can tell that my arm is locking.
About there.
Yeah, now that's about half the pressure you were using before. So cool. That's much better. Now, I'm just going to do a little trick. I'm just going to go right down the center, release that pressure. I'm just going to go down like that, and now try it again and see if there's a difference.
You're not holding.
I'm not holding, and can you feel that?
Yeah.
I mean, I was trying.
Yeah.
So I'll go down again. So with that, just that little amount of pressure, yeah. If I come back up again,
you're back.
I'm back. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you, Carol. That was welcome. Great. You're a star. Maybe your career change should be to get into this. Yeah, absolutely. You could be awesome. So, you know, that's how it works. You know, this voice of innate intelligence. And so, you know, what I'd like you guys to do, particularly those of you that aren't as experienced, is to take what you've just, seen me here doing, along with that little best practice tip of going gradually, and go start trying that on people, in the next week, try it like 3 times a day with different people, because everybody responds a little differently. Try it at work, try it at home. It's not going to work with your pet, but um, just go around. I do this with people all over the place. I'll get people in line at the supermarket sometimes, or I remember once balancing somebody online waiting for a ride at Disneyland. So, and because they had a lot of motion sickness, and we were about to get on the Star Wars ride, and they were terrified that they were going to get sick in the middle of it all. So I balanced them in the 45 minutes we had to wait online, and then we went in and we did the ride, and they went dancing out of there like that was awesome, and I went out of there like, nobody balanced me. So yeah, it's an awesome tool to use in this way. I'm just going to check in on the chat, see if there's anything. Okay, so no real questions or anything like that. Thumbs up, Adam, great job. So that's cool. So by now, hopefully we've discussed about these models of healing and the nature of stress, and now we've seen how the use of muscle response feedback is this voice of innate intelligence that gives a great way of getting information from the body. So by now, you should understand that muscle response feedback, how it works, and why it's such a critical tool in helping people achieve optimal wellness. So, with continued learning and practice, then you'll be able to use muscle response feedback as this voice of innate intelligence. But it is just that. It's a voice. And what you still need is a language. Now, the language of the body is electromagnetic. When you can communicate with the body in its own native language, then you can start finding out where blockages exist and find out, what it needs in order to unblock the solution, to unblock the imbalances. And, that involves needing solutions. So, of course, you need the solutions as well. So when you have the solutions, then you have a way of helping the body unblock the blockages, release the compensations, and get it on its path towards wellness, freeing up energy so it can go through its own innate healing response. So that's it for that. But I still do have this other little bit I want to show you about my favorite energy technique, which is the figure eights. And most people who have done other trainings in muscle response feedback know a little bit about the figure eights, but the rest of the world doesn't know about it at all. And it's going to be a major technique. It wasn't mentioned in the course, but it's absolutely going to be in the course, and we're going to have some in-depth training about that. But what I want to get into your guys' mind is a specific use of the figure eights, and that is for acute injury. Because, even people who have learned about this often overlook the power of this technique in acute injury responses. And I've got many stories about that. In fact, I can show you, I don't know, let's see, can you see my fingernail there with that black spot? So that used to be all the way down at the bottom. A couple of months ago, I was trying to open a window, and the window was stuck. And so I'm like, I have my hands like this, and I'm trying to open it, not realizing that there was a lip there between that and the next window. And suddenly it, when it gave, it just went, choo, and my finger got crushed, absolutely crushed in that window frame. And immediately, you know, I looked at it, it already had that black spot down at the base of the fingernail. Now, if any of you ever had anything like that happen before, well, you've probably gone in and dunked it into ice and done things like that. But eventually, you know, it's throbbing, there's blood building up under the nail. Eventually the nail falls off, you know. Well, all I did was for 25 minutes, I did figure eights, which means that over this fingernail, I just drew a figure eight without touching. I just drew this figure eight right over there. And I did that for 25 minutes until the throbbing stopped. And then anytime during the course of the day that I started feeling throbbing again, I did it for another few minutes. And I did that all day long as needed. And that black spot never got any bigger. And the inflammation never really happened. So I didn't, because, you know, figure eights absolutely seems to reduce inflammation on the spot, reduce the body's reaction to an acute injury. And so that black spot was there the moment I first looked at it. It never changed. And it's now just taken these 2 months for that to grow out, but I never lost my nail. And I didn't have any pain. It was just like that. So that's, you know, one example. I've had bad sprained ankles where I did the same thing. And, you know, we've all used arnica and ice and all of that kind of stuff. But, you know, you sprain your ankle, it still turns amazingly different colors and gets all blown up and you can't wear a normal shoe. I've had serious sprained ankles where I do figure eights and you wouldn't know that anything was wrong. It's, you know, had some serious dental surgeries. Dentists are always giving me prescriptions for painkillers, you know, go home, you're going to need this. And I'm like, yeah, I'm okay. And the nurse, you know, I'm doing it, you know, in the chair, and the nurse is going, what are you doing? I'm like, you should be doing this to everybody that's in this chair. And it's remarkable. I've had some fairly serious dental surgery and I've never taken a painkiller for it. So that's the power of figure eight. So I just want you to get this into your consciousness, you know, into every little aspect of your being, you know, put sticky notes all over your house, whatever it takes. When I injure myself, do figure eights on the injury. Because and then if you do that, you know, if you have something that happens, send me the story, because I love getting stories about, you know, people's figure eight experiences. It's always an amazing thing. It's great for scars. You know, somebody who's had surgery, the sooner you can start doing figure eight over that scar, it's going to help it heal better. And, you know, it's good for old scars too, but that's kind of another scenario. So, so that's how figure eights work. And I wanted to share that with you, and really, hopefully you get that the first thing you think of in any kind of acute injury is to just start drawing the figure eight. Some people ask me, you know, does it matter what direction I do it in? It doesn't. When you've had an acute injury, it's just, you know, the body will take whatever it can get. And the eights have been attributed to Tibetan medicine. I've never seen any specific references in any Tibetan books about figure eights. I think they come from many ancient cultures. And, you know, we're not really sure exactly how or why they work. I have some pretty interesting theories about that. That I'll go into much deeper in the course and share that with people in the course. But the main thing is that you use them, because they're just a phenomenal technique. So that's it for today's webinar. How do you know which way to do the figure eight? Well, you probably asked that question right before I answered it. You know, during an acute injury, it doesn't matter. You just, you know, you go in the direction. You know, usually you follow the line. You know, if there's a particular line, like if you have a cut going this way, then you're going to do it over in that direction. But if the cut's going this way, then you're going to do it in that direction. But which direction you actually start the figure eight at that point, it doesn't matter. How can this approach alleviate back and disc problems? Carlos. Well, you know, we're not working in the medical model, so I can't tell you that, you know, you're going to learn specific techniques to address that. We're working with the holistic model, and the thing about back, you know, backs don't just simply go out. There's a lot of things that lead up to the point with stressors, to the point where a person's particular weakness, then, you know, the back goes out. And so, you know, the techniques you're going to learn might expose some of the underlying blockages for the body to be able to heal and get over that on its own. And that, because that's what the model is. And you know, and I work with a lot of back pain and a lot of back issues, and have great success with that. So of course I have 35 years of tools to work with. Nevertheless, it's amazing what can happen with just, you know, a basic set of tools. I've seen people, you know, in one weekend leave a workshop, get proficient with what they just learned, and start making huge differences in people's lives. And that can include back pain and issues like that. So I can't give you any specific promises about that, you know, but I trust the process. Is there a way to increase protein digestive enzymes without taking vitamins or supplements? Well, similar answer. I would say the short answer is yes. It's a matter of identifying, you know, where the blockages are for the body that's keeping it from doing that. And as long as, you know, if it's not some sort of deep genetic defect or some real, you know, damage that just simply can't heal, which usually isn't the case, then yeah, those kinds of things are things you can really often make a big difference with people. You know, digestive issues are very stress related, because when a person's under a lot of stress, it turns the digestive system off. And so when you can start help them managing their stress, then the digestion can start to function again and things can change. And, you know, once you fix the digestion, then the immune system gets better as well. So it's kind of, it has a cascade effect. And, you know, I used a poor choice of language there and saying once you fix the digestion, because you're not fixing it, you being the person who's got the problem. So, you know, once you help a person fix their own digestion is really the proper way of looking at that, then yeah, these things can really change. Well, again, thank you, everybody. I so appreciate your taking the time to spend with me today, and I hope it's been beneficial for you, and you know, that you got some good information out of it, maybe learn some things, and then if it makes sense for you to join the course and follow along in the training, I'd love to see you there, and we're going to have a whole lot of fun doing that. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next time, and good night.